Good morning. Welcome to worship at Westminster and to our inclusive family of faith. We especially welcome our visitors and those joining us on YouTube.
I want to listen to where I can hear it. Let it guide me and realize that I can go with the flow unending, that is blending, that is real, and I want to feel. I want to walk in the earthly garden, far from cities, far from fear. I want to talk to the growing garden, to the devas, to the deer, and to be one with the river flowing, breezes blowing, skies above. And I want to love.
Our gospel reading this morning comes from Luke 10, verses 38 through 42. Listen to this. Now, as they went on their way, Jesus entered a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. She had a sister named Mary who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to what he was saying. But Martha was distracted by her many tasks. So she came to him and asked, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her then to help me." But the Lord answered her, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her." This is the gospel of the Lord. Recently, we had a group of friends over to our house for a pool party and barbecue. And our common denominator is that we are all pastors. Some of us went to seminary together. Others became friends as we served together here in Grace Presbyterian. And as each family arrived, my middle son, Camden, was eager to know who was the pastor. Was it the wife or the husband? He delighted in discovering the pastoral secret identity in each family, since we all look the same in bathing suits. But then Alex showed up. As he had with the other families, Camden asked Alex, who was the pastor, him or his wife? Alex gently blew that binary out of the water as he said, "Well, both of us." Both Alex and his wife, Kathy Lee Cornell, serve as pastors at 2 different churches in Dallas. Out of all the options in Camden's head, that was not what he expected him to say. Who's the pastor in your family? Who is the one you can count on to pray before family meals, or who will listen to your problems? Who is the baker of the best cookies, or the hostess with the mostest? Who tells the funniest stories? Who gives the best hugs? We like to put people in these categories and labels, and sometimes it feels pretty good to know that you are the best biscuit casserole maker in the family. But other times, these labels can sting. Who's always late to your family gatherings? Who's the one who always makes the rude comments? Who takes a nap rather than help clean up? And it's hard to break out of these categories and labels in our families when they are set. It took at least a decade for my family to no longer see me as a picky eater, because I even eat onions now. It's easier for us to sort out the world this way. You're this or that, good or bad, helpful or hurtful, successful or a failure, faithful or faithless, included or rejected. It's almost natural to hear this gospel story then and wonder, are you a Mary or a Martha? Someone who can just be or someone who has to do? A faithful disciple or someone who misses the point? An attentive hostess or a stressed overfunctioner? This particular story about these two sisters only appears in the Gospel of Luke. Remember that we are in the midst of Luke's long travel narrative that spans about 10 chapters. Jesus has set his face toward Jerusalem. He's been rejected by a Samaritan village. And so he specifies what hospitality should look like as he sends out his disciples, emphasizing the urgency of following him now above all other commitments. And then Jesus tells a lawyer a parable about what loving your neighbor, about what radical hospitality looks like. And then he arrives in this village, probably Bethany, at Martha's home, continuing to receive and explain hospitality. What if instead of reducing this interesting pericope to an either-or catfight, what would happen if we, like Mary, stopped and listened? Our eyes and hearts might be open wider to God's words if we but stop and listen. Stop and listen. Martha welcomed Jesus into her home, not into her husband's home, her father's home, her brother Lazarus's home, but her home. She hosts Jesus, only to find that he is the ultimate host. Stop and listen. Martha was distracted by her many tasks. What if I told you that in Greek, many task was the word diakonon? Diakonon, where we get the word deacon. Diakonon, which is translated in Paul's letters again and again as ministry. Martha was overwhelmed with her ministry while preparing to serve Jesus. She's a minister who's forgotten to take her Sabbath. She's forgotten the larger picture of why she is serving, not being rooted in the Word. Stop and listen. Martha, Martha. Are Jesus' words to Martha a scolding or an invitation? Do they break her apart further, or do they call her into wholeness, to set aside what can wait and to focus on what can't, to be present over perfect? Stop and listen. Martha has done her part to welcome Jesus into her home, and Mary is continuing that hospitality by being attentive to their guest. Two parts of a whole life of discipleship: welcoming, listening, ministering, learning, teaching, being sent out, making a home of belonging. All these and more flow out when we find out our identity rooted in Jesus Christ. The brilliant and compassionate Catholic theologian Henri Nouwen states what he calls the 5 lies of identity. We have this on the screen. I am what I have. I am what I do. I am what other people say or think of me. I am nothing more than my worst moment. I am nothing less than my best moment. It's easy to get trapped into being defined by our possessions, by our job, by other people's opinions, by the self-deprecating or sinfully proud tapes that play on loop in our minds and in our hearts. These lies of identity tell us that this is the foundation of who we are, instead of our identity being first and foremost only found in Jesus Christ. It's no surprise that Nouwen mentions these lies in a talk called Reclaiming Our Christian Identity. These lies pull us apart when we buy into their illusions. Stop and listen. Jesus tells Martha that she is worried, and yet that English translation doesn't quite capture the Greek meaning. To be worried here comes from the word that means to be pulled apart, to be pulled in many directions, to be fragmented. To be worried here is like saying to go to pieces. Theologian and minister Debbie Thomas puts it this way in her commentary on this passage. Jesus found Martha in just such a state of fragmentation, a condition in which she could not enjoy his company, savor his presence, find inspiration in her work, receive anything he wished to offer her, or show him genuine love. Instead, all she could do was question his love, fixate on herself, and triangulate. How many of us live in fragmented states, pulled apart by competing cares and worries and concerns, even worthwhile ones? How many of us have lived fragmented lives, believing lie after lie about our identity and not believing the truth God tells us? How many of us have struggled to understand the deep wholeness and fullness of the love of Jesus Christ? How many of us have struggled to get out of our own selves and our own heads, even at the feet of Jesus? How many of us seek after God with broken hearts instead of our whole selves? How often do we set our pursuit of God in the same section of achievement at work or gaining possessions? How many of us get stuck believing that we can do enough to earn God's love and attention? How many of us get stuck believing that we will never be truly loved and accepted by God? Instead of loving our neighbors as ourselves, how many of us consider others' worth based on where they are from, what language they speak, the color of their skin, or their political affiliation? How many of us define not just ourselves but other by these lies of identity, judging them on their job, their possessions, their reputation, their worst moment, or their best moment? How many of us are further fragmented by believing the lie that it's you against me rather than us together as one family of God? The story of Mary and Martha reminds us that we are fragmented by the world around us, broken by the lies of identity, pulled apart and pitted against each other. Competing claims tell us that we are not enough, that we cannot do it, that we don't matter. The lies of identity force us into a competition and an economy of scarcity, that if we are to gain, someone else must lose. Jesus, on the other hand, gently calls us by our name, not once but twice, reminding us of who we really are, beloved, named, claimed by God. Jesus invites us home even in the midst of our own home, again and again, that we might be made whole. Jesus, the source of all, the fullness of all, as Colossians tells us, restores our wholeness and reminds us that there's room for all at his feet. There's room for all at his table. There's room for all in his house. Some people will tell you that I ruin movies this way. I like to think I make them better, but I always seem to find Jesus in movies. And in the Marvel movie Guardians of the Galaxy from several years ago, there's a large sentient tree who has a vocabulary limited simply to, I am Groot. I am Groot. I am Groot. And only in that order. Some of you might have met Groot in my office on my desk. Throughout the movie, with various inflections and meanings detected only by his best friend, he says again and again, I am Groot. I am Groot. The only change happens near the end, as he makes a sacrifice to save the lives of those closest together, to move them from separate people to one. He rejects the lies of identity that would keep them separate and embraces the truth that they are, in fact, interdependent. I am Groot becomes we are Groot. As Jesus lives, dies, and is resurrected, I am God's child becomes we are God's children. I am loved becomes we are loved. I am redeemed becomes we are redeemed. Through Jesus' gift, our parts are made whole, and we are called home once more to do the one thing, to stop and listen, to trust in the word spoken as well as the word incarnate himself. Jesus invites Martha to move from the I to the we, from the hostess to the guest, from carrying all these burdens to setting it down for him, from the busy work of ministry to being made whole at his feet. Martha reminds us that even good Jesus-following ministers like you and me need to be called back again and again to Jesus' words, to the one thing, to the trust in God that shapes who we are and how we live our lives. At the end of the day, I see Mary and Martha not in tension, but as part of a cycle. We listen at Jesus' feet, learning from his words and his ways. We put those words and ways into action in ministry, serving others as we have been taught by the greatest host. And when we start to get pulled apart, we head back to Jesus' feet to be reminded of who we are and whose we are. We must learn from Christ so that we may put his words into actions, that we might be made whole, that we might be made one with each other and with all the creation, that I may become we. Stop and listen. As the Gospel of John tells it, these two sisters weep with Jesus outside of their brother's tomb. They are frustrated in Jesus' delayed arrival, believing that he could have healed Lazarus. In the midst of the grief, not knowing the end of their story, Martha makes a powerful confession, clearer than almost any other Jesus follower. She says, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world." Martha received Jesus' invitation to oneness, to wholeness, to remembering who she was and who Jesus was and who her trustworthy God was. She clearly learned to see Jesus for who he is, not just a brilliant teacher who might resolve sisterly arguments, but the Messiah, the very Son of God, coming into the world to bring healing and wholeness. So this week and always, may you stop and listen. Whether you're the cookie baker or storyteller, you have your truest identity at the feet of Jesus. Whether you are Mary, Martha, or somewhere in between, Jesus calls you by name, not once but twice. You are worried and pulled apart by many things. There is need of only one. May you find that deep, abiding trust in the Word of God that truly defines who we are, moving from I to we. May you embrace being present with Jesus over being perfect for him. And may all the broken pieces of our lives be put together anew in the healing, gracious love of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Come my way, my truth, my life, such a way as gives us breath, such a truth as ends all strife, such a life as killeth death. Come, my light, my feast, my strength, such a light as shows a feast, such a feast as mends in length, such a strength as makes his guest. Come, my joy, as joy.